There's a thin strip of land off the southern shore of Long Island, New York. A barrier beach, scrub and sand on one side, the open Atlantic on the other, and a single lonely road called Ocean Parkway running straight down the middle. For most of its life, this was the kind of place only the locals really knew. People came here to surf, to fish, to watch the sun come up over the water. By most accounts, it was one of the prettiest beaches on all of Long Island. But say the name of that beach today, Gilgo Beach, and almost nobody pictures the ocean anymore. They picture something much darker, because over the span of several years, young women began disappearing into the New York City night. Each of them would tell a friend she was heading out to meet someone, and then she'd simply stop answering. And here's the part that still makes the skin crawl. After each of these women went quiet, there was one final eerie sign she'd ever been there at all. Her phone. The phones kept moving across the map, kept reaching out to other phones, long after the women themselves had gone silent. Today's true crime story is the story of the Long Island serial killer and the breathtakingly ordinary man who hid behind a life almost nobody ever thought to question. But first, if you love dark, twist-filled true crime stories told the way you'd hear them around a campfire, you have come to exactly the right place, because that is all we do here. And we drop a brand new case every single week. So do me a quick favor, gift that like button a shiny new jigsaw puzzle. Just maybe don't mention you've quietly pocketed 2 of the corner pieces. Hit subscribe and tap that notification bell so the next case finds its way to you. Alright, let's get into it. The Lego set I'm building during today's true crime story is the Lego Speed Champions Ferrari 499P set 77261. And this Lego build is a special one. See, the Ferrari 499P isn't some flashy sprinter built to win a quick drag race. It's an endurance machine, the hypercar that roared Ferrari all the way back to the top step at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, one of the longest, most punishing races on the entire planet. This is a Lego build designed around one simple idea. Some races aren't won with a single fast lap. They're won by whoever flat out refuses to stop. And honestly, that fits today's story like a perfectly snapped in Lego brick. Because the case you're about to hear was not cracked overnight. It was a marathon, more than a decade of dead ends, heartbreak, and families who refuse to let the world look away. So as this Lego endurance racer comes together piece by piece, let's get into today's true crime documentary. The first thread of the Long Island serial killer story belongs to a young woman named Maureen. Maureen was 25, a mom from Connecticut, and by every account, someone who lit up a room, a talker, a hustler, the kind of person who wanted the whole world to like her. She'd worked as a car dealer, a cashier, a telemarketer, stitching together whatever she could to provide for her family. When it wasn't enough, she turned to sex work, advertising online, and choosing her own clients. In the summer of 2007, Maureen traveled down to New York City, told a friend she was heading out to meet someone, and was never seen again. For 2 years, that was the whole story. One missing woman, no answers. And then it happened again. Her name was Melissa. Melissa had come to New York chasing a dream of becoming a hairdresser. And when that didn't pan out, she too ended up doing sex work on her own terms. In the summer of 2009, Melissa was contacted by someone using a burner phone, a cheap prepaid throwaway phone with no name attached to it, who offered her a lot of money. And after that night, Melissa vanished too. But here's where the Long Island serial killer revealed something truly chilling about who he was. In the days after Melissa disappeared, someone began using her phone to call her teenage little sister. And the things this man said on those calls were cruel beyond words, taunting a grieving family, tormenting a child who just wanted her big sister back. Police traced the calls to Midtown Manhattan, but the man was careful. He never stayed on the line long enough to be pinned down. And then, just like that, the call stopped. Think about that for a second. This wasn't someone in a panic. This was someone who was enjoying it. Over the next year, the pattern repeated. A young mom from Maine named Megan who'd turned to sex work to give her little daughter the life she herself never had. Megan went down to New York, checked into a hotel on Long Island, got a call from a burner phone, and walked out into the night, gone. Then a woman named Amber, originally from North Carolina, with the biggest heart of anyone who knew her. Same story. A burner phone, a client, and then nothing. 4 women, 4 disappearances, and the strange, sickening thread tying them together, every single one had been talking to a phone with no name. Now here's the thing you have to understand about the Long Island serial killer case. For a long time, nobody even knew there was a serial killer. 4 separate women, 4 separate towns, 4 she'll turn up shrugs from people who didn't take any of it seriously. These women were treated as throwaway people, and they might have stayed forgotten forever if it weren't for a 5th young woman named Shannan Gilbert. In May of 2010, Shannan was driven out to a small, gated little community on the Long Island shore called Oak Beach to meet a client at his home. And somewhere inside that house, something went terribly wrong, because in the middle of the night, Shannan did something none of the others had a chance to do. She called 911. For roughly 20 minutes, a frightened young woman told an operator that someone was after her, that she needed help. And then she ran. She ran out into the dark, into the marsh and the brush of that unfamiliar little community, calling out for anyone who would listen. And by the time police finally arrived, Shannan Gilbert was gone, vanished into the night just like the others. Her mother refused to let it go. She pushed and kept Shannan's name in front of the cameras and the police, demanding a search. And months later, in December of 2010, that search finally brought a canine officer and his dog out along that lonely stretch of Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach. The dog caught a scent in the thick brush off the side of the road, and what that officer found there was the discovery that blew the entire case wide open. The body the dog found wasn't Shannan Gilbert. It was someone else, someone who'd been hidden in that thorny scrub along the parkway. And here's the gut punch. Police didn't stop there. Over the next few days, working that same lonely half-mile of brush, investigators found 3 more. 4 young women, all hidden within a stone's throw of each other. When the medical examiner finally identified them, the family's worst fears came true. They were Maureen, Melissa, Megan, Amber, the 4 women who'd vanished over the previous years. The press gave them a name that stuck, the Gilgo Four. And that should have been the whole horrifying story, but it wasn't, because the police kept searching that stretch of road, and they kept finding more. More remains turned up along Ocean Parkway, and as investigators studied what they were finding, a far more disturbing truth began to take shape. Some of these victims had been out there far longer than the Gilgo Four, months, years. This wasn't a killer who had just started. Whatever this was had been happening quietly, in the dark, for a very long time. And some of the most heartbreaking discoveries among them are details this story is simply going to leave alone out of respect for the people they were and the families who loved them. So now the question hanging over all of Long Island wasn't just who did this. It was, how on earth has he been getting away with it for so long? And the answer to that question is the first place this story truly turns on you. Here's what you'd assume, right? You'd assume the Long Island serial killer stayed free for over a decade because he was some kind of criminal mastermind, a ghost, untouchable, always 10 steps ahead. That's the story we tell ourselves about killers like this, but that's not what happened, not even close. Because as far back as 2010 and 2011, investigators already had an astonishing amount to work with. A witness who'd actually seen the man on the night Amber disappeared described him in vivid detail. A very large, ogre-like figure, well over 6 feet tall, with bushy hair and glasses. That same witness remembered his vehicle too. A distinctive, dark-colored, first-generation Chevy Avalanche. A truck so unusual you'd remember it if you saw it. And then there were the phones. When the FBI dug into the cell tower data from those burner phones, a pattern jumped right off the page. The phones tied to the victims kept traveling between Midtown Manhattan and one very specific bedroom community on the south shore of Long Island called Massapequa Park. In other words, investigators had a physical description, a rare vehicle, and a map pointing at the exact town where the killer most likely lived. as early as 2011. So why no arrest? Why did this drag on for more than a decade? Because the people who were supposed to be solving it imploded. The top of the local police department fell into a spiral of scandal, ego, and corruption, led by a police chief who was, frankly, the last person who should have been anywhere near a case like this, a man eventually convicted of crimes of his own. The federal experts who specialize in exactly these kinds of serial cases were pushed out and kept at arm's length. Infighting, cover-ups, and dysfunction swallowed the investigation whole. The clues sat right there in the file, gathering dust, while the families waited and waited and waited. That's the real horror of this stretch of the story. The Long Island serial killer wasn't winning some brilliant chess match. The people who were supposed to be hunting him simply weren't playing the game at all. Now hold on, because here's where this Lego Ferrari finally hits its stride. The part of the race where refusing to stop actually pays off. In 2022, a new district attorney and a new police commissioner did something almost embarrassingly simple. They built a fresh task force. The state police, the FBI, the DA, all rowing in the same direction for the first time. And they went back to the very beginning. They reopened the file. They re-interviewed the old witnesses. And one of the most important clues that finally cracked this whole thing open had been sitting in that case file for more than a dozen years. That witness from the night Amber vanished was interviewed again, and once again, that witness described the same large, ogre-like man and that same unmistakable dark Chevy Avalanche. So the task force did the thing nobody had bothered to fully do before. They took everything they already had, the cell data pointing to Massapequa Park and Midtown, the physical description, that rare truck, and they searched for a single person who fit all of it at once. Someone who lived in Massapequa Park, someone who commuted into Midtown Manhattan, someone who owned a first-generation Chevy Avalanche. 6 weeks. That's all it took once they actually connected the dots. 6 weeks and the task force had a name. And just like the last corner of this Lego Ferrari finally clicking together, this is the moment the whole story snaps into focus. Because the man the task force zeroed in on wasn't a drifter. He wasn't a shadowy loner living off the grid. His name was Rex Heuermann, and Rex Heuermann was an architect. Let that sink in. Rex Heuermann had a good job in Manhattan, a career, a reputation as the guy who could cut through New York City's endless red tape and get your building plans approved. Rex Heuermann had a wife and children. He lived in the very house he'd grown up in that quiet, manicured neighborhood of Massapequa Park. He built furniture in his garage, the same workshop his own father had used. To the neighbors, to his clients, to nearly everyone who ever met him, Rex Heuermann was just a big, slightly awkward family man. But investigators still needed the one thing that would tie Rex Heuermann directly to the women. They needed DNA. Years earlier, a single male hair had been recovered with one of the victims. So a surveillance team followed Rex Heuermann, waiting for him to slip. And one day, outside his Midtown office, Rex Heuermann tossed a pizza box into a city trash can. Investigators swooped in, pulled the crust from inside, and rushed it to the lab. The DNA on that pizza crust matched the hair found years before. That was the linchpin. That was the moment they knew. And so, on a quiet Thursday night, as Rex Heuermann left his Midtown office, a team of officers stepped up behind him and told him he was under arrest. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He just stopped. So here's the double twist this whole story has been building to. The Long Island serial killer, the figure everyone imagined as some untouchable genius, turned out to be an ordinary-looking architect who got his coffee at the corner store and built furniture in his dad's old workshop. And the thing that kept him free for more than a decade wasn't his brilliance at all. It was a broken system that had everything it needed the entire time and simply failed to look. Rex Heuermann has pleaded not guilty, and the case against him is still making its way through the courts. So this story doesn't get a tidy bow on the end. What it gets is a reckoning, because for years these women were treated as if they didn't matter, as if, because of how they made a living, they weren't quite worth the search. But every single one of them was somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, somebody's mom, Maureen wanted to provide for her family. Megan wanted to give her little girl the childhood she never had. Amber had the biggest heart of anyone who knew her. They were not throwaway people. They never were. And one of the quiet tragedies of this whole case is that if the world had treated them like they mattered from the very start, who knows how many years of horror might have been cut short. So today, like always, this story is dedicated to the women whose lives were taken and to the families who never, ever stopped fighting to bring them home. And here's the part that should genuinely keep you up tonight. The Long Island serial killer wasn't a monster lurking in the shadows where you'd expect him. He was the neighbor with the messy yard, the architect with the firm handshake, the husband, the dad, the guy standing in line ahead of you at the store. That's the thing about the people capable of the very worst. They almost never look the part. They look ordinary. They look safe. They look exactly like everyone else. And if a killer hiding behind an ordinary family in an ordinary house just sent a chill down your spine, oh, you are not ready for this next one, because in a small town in Brazil, there was another perfectly ordinary little house. A husband, 2 women, a little girl playing out front, and a sweet little family business, selling warm, homemade pastries to the neighbors. It looked like the most normal home on the entire street, but young women kept walking through that front door looking for honest work, and the world never saw them walk back out. That story is sitting right here, 1 click away, and trust me, you will never look at a friendly neighborhood the same way again.